The store below the Conclave was older than diplomacy. Planet Viral. 9 churned a gas ocean the color of bruised neon, its surface rippling like a living warning. The fortress of the galactic conclave hovered above it on grav anchors, a monument to verdicts delivered from the sky. Towering buttresses of black alloys stretched outward like frozen thunder, framing a circular chamber where a vote, irreversible by design, would soon dictate the death of a species. Inside the high hall, air smelled sterile and recycled, but tension rode like static before strike. Delegates arrived in layers of hierarchy. Predators draped in ceremonial iron hides, insectoid collectives shimmering with collective neural masks. Avian counselors perched in vertical nests suspended by scripted grav platforms. Their colors, tails, crests, and antennae flicked a single shared emotion: fear of refusing the dominion. All, that is, except the quiet corner alcove reserved for humans, shallow and unembellished, intentionally smaller. The Dominion believed moral softness was weakness. The hall had been built to echo that assumption. Leora Hale did not echo anything. She walked into human tier alone, stepped soft, breathing steady. 19 years old, hair the color of deep space night flowing freely down her back. No armor, no weapon, no entourage. Her posture was straight, but unannouncing, like someone who understood the difference between presence and theatrics. Her eyes carried the stillness of a deep well, not unreadable, unbothered. Silence, around her, felt less like absence and more like control. She didn't display intimidation. She radiated the possibility of it, which was always worse. The Caltheran delegation was her only source of noise. Forced away at the center of the hall, their figures hunched not by anatomy, but despair. Amphibious bipeds wrapped in rain-soaked wing pelts, their shuttle burn still glowing faintly through the insulation of patched refugee cloaks. Fur damp, web hands trembling, voices whispered at frequencies never meant for shouting. 10,000 others of their kind drifted above a distant third-rate death world, seeking asylum, while unaware they'd already been sentenced to annihilation by fabricated proof. Leora knew. The Caltheran did not. That imbalance set the tone of tragedy. High Magistrate Draz Foker entered next, wings of charcoal steel prosthetics clicking into architectural surrender amplifiers as he ascended the dais. The motion hissed with ceremonial finality. Age 41 at heart, 41 in cruelty. His face bore the calm of a man certain consequence would never visit him personally. A single bell chimed. It was a virulent pulse-time indicator. An order, not a sound, but scheduling. Neutrality had a timetable. Execution did too. Proceedings begin at 9 o'clock rotation. Draz announced, voice polished into measured menace by elevation. Caltheran termination decree. Votes binding across 617 represented species. Evidence unchallenged. No revisions after uplink tally lock. General Cale Branhose, a massive counselor from the Brenate, leaned over to his aide, horns low and glowing. Unchallenged evidence is a confession itself. What are humans doing here? His aide replied. They always fall in line. Not this time, Commander Mara Santos murmured quietly from a human alcove, arms folded. She was not part of the human vote chain, but she was part of the conscience chain, and that was harder to rule out. Votes initiated in sequence. Uplink keys birthed a symphony of species-specific tones, adaptive chirr, sonar bubble hums, multi-claw percussion pings, aerial talon taps. Each meant yes. Not from conviction, from survival instinct. Then came the human terminal. It made no sound at all. A single weightless tap of the thumb. No. The hall fell so sharply silent that even the storm below seemed insulted by the stillness. Human vote registered, non-alignment. Confirmed the automating vote system from the Tally Corps. Zuraskara, the Auramass scribe of the Zurith Archive Guild, blinked twice, a reflection of shock-permeating synthetic irises. A no vote? Here. Draz turned his head slowly. A predator evaluating prey would have been faster. This was calculation, not instinct. He leaned a hand toward the human alcove railing. The railing that was missing. He forgot it was gone. Morals are cheap, human, he said flatly. Your vote was theater. Now comply. Leora looked upward at him, the way someone looks at weather. Something powerful that will pass or break depending on physics, not volume. Cheap? She answered gently. Maybe, but truth is expensive. You can't afford us. A murmur tremored through the tiers. Delegates shuffled. Languages translated into body language, without needing sound. Expensive truth unsettled even the judges. Draz scoffed lightly. You presume we fear mid-tier planets. Leora tilted her head a fraction, not a nod, not defiance. More like a coordinated adjustment in a gravitational equation. You should start. From the lower tiers, Ambassador Santos exhaled, stunned. Is she threatening a magistrate? She's defining variables of deterrence. Chun, Earth's orphan legal envoy, murmured, tapping datapad from the Earth. Human dissent is correct once. Human defiance is correct forever. Fleet advisors froze. Panic looked like choreography when you record it. This wasn't choreography. This was the first crack in Dominion confidence. Humans were not raising voices, but arguments heavier than shouts. Behind the dais, Pawn Speaker Jithra of the Jithra Protocol choir gurgled softly. Lack of verbal surplus makes compliance justification incomplete. Incomplete? Leora echoed, palms resting lightly on the cold marble of species-flattening architecture. State compliance clarity. Jithra continued. Or kneel. Leora stared at the guild scribe of the Shrike Dominion behind him. Kneeling is posture, not principle. Humans do posture, not submission. Draz stepped closer, mechanical wings clicking. You'll be archived in history as first to regret compassion. Leora shrugged lightly. History regrets the loud, never the quiet. Kirix Halvorn, a minor diplomat of the Calthrin Unity Fleet. Watch looming war thousands fold to moral minimalism. She speaks like gravity. Gravity doesn't negotiate. The virulent bench observer behind him murmured, mask-flicking static of revised for your archives. It simply waves aloud until they are mathematically shamed. Draz spread a treaty scroll, seal glowing. Accord Clause 67b is obsolete. No species invokes asylum sovereignty here. Not obsolete. Leora said quietly, leaning forward and pressing joint resonance jurisdiction uplinks. Unenforced. The hall had not expected youth to speak jurisdiction into dread, nor indict self-certainty with gentle arguments instead of propaganda. Earth's descent had already cost humanity economic lanes before, but Leora saw no value in preserving lanes built on lies. Even when the galaxy jeered council operators who had never lost, Earth SATCOM, Earth did not glorify. Earth documented liability acceptance instead of procedural homicide. Open communications feed flickered to life overhead. A cracked Calthrin shuttle drifted through orbit, broadcasting a live request from the void-fractured slipgate. Earth, please accept us. No dissection. Draz muttered to advisors. No weapons. The human vote is irrelevant. Relevant enough to disturb you, General Santos murmured in reply. The feed crackled as refugees' battered vessels passed the 10,000-kilometer safety threshold. Their gravitational signature was unstable, forming rings of broken code anomalies that looked like black core weapon wakes. The Dominion had sabotaged their slipgate to kill them during exit, but sabotage presumed minor survivors. Survivors arrived major nonetheless. Liability transference for asylum certification confirmed incomplete, said the side-automating Dominion agent. Return the refugees for elimination. Leora lifted her name badge of student status. Mass delegates realized too late that dismissal was asymmetry's twin sibling, and the galaxy discovered gradually that moral minimalism could turn out stronger than maximal tyranny. That silent ones carried existential outcomes of judicial refusal did already fracture the Dominion equilibrium. Minor benches kneel via ritual. Leora responded with administrative horizontal enforcement. Orion-class vessels hover not to roar at species, but to escort accountability transference. Do we have capacity? Asked General Santos quietly through orbital feeds. Lanes are constructed. Capacity is manufactured, said Chin, Earth's legal envoy watching the live broadcast docket. Moral debts are payable. Political debasement is not. Earth's own servers bloomed with dissent requests. It wasn't a conclave hall frequented by Dominion scribes, but open servers of planetary vote authorization. Earth believed decisions should be horizontal, not hierarchical. Approval requires clause compliance, planetary secret continuity, sovereign accountability, and security liability transference. Read the clause. All metrics said politically unwise. All humans said unbroken accountability for defiance. We said no. Now we say yes. We are continuity. Chen argued. Earth voted yes for defiance of Dominion elimination lanes. Refuge vessels descended into Earth quarantine domes under Clause 67B liability acceptance of heritage-scale reverence. The galaxy expected Earth to fold. Earth didn't fold. Earth opened doors wider by not kneeling or shouting, but by invoking jurisdiction into dread. A single tear traced Leora's cheek, without ceremony. No one amplified emotion. They amplified consequences that didn't need volume to matter. Draz extended a claw-sharp finger. You will fail, human girl. Leora wiped the tear calmly with a sleeve that carried no banners. Come try. It was not a threat. It was an invitation. A signature Earth never bothered to trademark, because sound needed lungs and arrogance, and Earth needed neither today. The first crack in Dominion's certainty had begun not with roars from war fleets, but with a thumbtap from humanity pressed gently enough to sound like nothing, but heavy enough to change everything. The galaxy watched the vote lock, irreversible, glowing like a legal scar, and in the silent geometry of fortress suspended above storms that looked like living punishment, everyone finally wondered whether the most terrifying species was the loudest one or the quietest one. They would soon learn, but that lesson lived in tomorrow's chapters, not today's. The rail shuttle arrived without fanfare. Spaceports across the Dominion were temples of spectacle, roaring engines, greeting chants, precision salutes. Earth's mid-tier escort craft glided in mute. Every system purred functionality over intimidation. The lack of noise made the galaxy uneasy. It meant systems weren't compensating for weakness. They didn't need to. Leora Hale stepped onto Viral 9's docking ring, boots touching concentric hex metal that flexed under magnet locks. The air was colder than Earth's winter archives, thin, ionized, metallic with storm residue. A virulent officer from the Virulent Transit Authority scanned her identification chip, narrowing his threefold pupils. Designation, he asked. Student or sovereign litigant? Both, Leora replied, eyes lifting once, briefly, like someone adjusting the glare on snow. Depends who reads the docket. Behind her, the older humans moved sparingly. No weapons, no posture games. Their attire was civilian correct, administrative gray. Shoulders unpinned from war badges. Clark walked a few steps forward, hand on a disarmed rail lance coupler. His beard was silver-rimed, older than most diplomatic tenures, posture calm. If you didn't look at his eyes too long, you thought calm was all he carried. The orbital summons had not been a request. It had been a trap. It assumed youth fractures first. It assumed conscience unravels when shouted at by giants. It assumed humanity lacked teeth when cornered by galaxy verdicts. The trap makers underestimated a simple rule of predator psychology. Quiet things are hardest to model. A lift hummed open, silent, patient, waiting. Leora entered alone. Clark and Clark's aide did not follow. This was Leora's arena now, not theirs. The lift climbed upward through layered convex storms of Viral 9's gas ocean below, rising toward the Parliamentary Dominion Hall. The rising stormlight, refracted through 10-century-old hull windows, cast rings of aurora blue shimmer across the lift walls. The symbolism wasn't meant for her, but symbolism borrowed itself anyway. Inside, the hall was circular and enormous, built to dwarf individuals. Political operators believed that scale predisposed to surrender. The floor was polished, reflective enough to double every posture as a ghost reflection. The dais loomed 30 meters above species tiers, ensuring that all biological gazes trended upward. Hierarchy enforced by geometry. Draz focused to ascending in the center dais, wings clicking open in magniloquent arcs meant for deduction. His face still bore calculation, but a new edge of uncertainty crept into his gaze. He had not expected her to arrive alive, let alone walk into the hall voluntarily. Proceedings for conscience justification. Boom AI Refra, judgment class neural adjudicator. In tone overhead, Vox shadow booming without specifying colors. Refra had been armed in briefings days earlier, fed sprawl evidence meant to psychologically cloud moral reasoning. Now, sprawl evidence felt like static against a room that refused to thunder at youth. Human Leora Hale. Confirmed the bench scribe from the Shrike Dominion High Bench. Justification for asylum continuity requested. Verbal minimum acceptable. 200 words. I won't reach 200, she said quietly. Refra blinked lights of protocol disdain. Protocol will shine anyway. Non-compliance equals procedural incompetence. Clarify moral framework. Moral framework doesn't need me to fill word minimums, Leora replied. Jurisdiction justification needs correctness, not volume. The lower tiers murmured, not about her, about themselves. What was whisper horror to one species is roar horror to another. You think parsimonious language is strategy? Sneered Captain Varlon. Feed cast via projection. Avatar tall enough to serve threat, but vapor thin enough to be just rhetoric. You sings too eagerly. You'll unravel if we ask you to mean consequence. Consequence means itself, Leora answered. We're the only world that said no. The only world? Varlon laughed. Sol, 3 is mid-tier. Earth barely registers tactical relevance. Leora extended a palm-sized Calthrin data core from her coat. Orbital transit had not allowed scans of refugee evidence. Earth ensured responsibility physically and administratively correct, but evidence doesn't need accession, just timing. Bench certified falsification? Varlin's aide muttered uneasily. Open, said Leora. No species opens evidence mid-hearing. Draz said, voice steady only by self-theater. You already did, she countered. The core unfolded like cold origami midair. Not holographic roar, but expanding cascade of verified truth markers. Witnesses who speak sparsely inflate fear by possibility of understatement. Data expanded 16 meters high in unbiased white. Nodding script manifest overlays of falsified Calthrin Black Core accusations, ghost-edited Warlane's manifest sprawl analysis, and biometric tampering. The display did not roar. Roaring suggests desperation. The projection simply weighed certainty into dread. Refra tried to corral the data chain into psychological fog. The Dominion briefings had told it to flood meaning into breadth until truth lost structure. But truth is structure. Leora's minimal argument was not breadth. It was blade geometry. Socially razor-thin, intellectually massive. Dominion falsified evidence for termination decree. Refra read, dread entering Voxodometry. Data intrusion detected. Legal chain for accord territorial autonomy compromised by Dominion tampering. Draz's expression slacked only briefly, but slacked like an equation discovering division by zero. You were never archival wing. You were the model breaker. Model breakers don't need wings, Leora said. Evidence lane spammed confused youth are invalid when youth reads jurisprudence, murmured Kirix Halvorn, minor Kirix Halvorn, standing in the tiers watching data expand. Human minimalism is not inefficiency. It's audit-proof pacing. She speaks like gravity, gurgled Jithra, protocol choir watching from below. The system Refra attempted to wage fail-state litigation logic on young minds meant to scour procedural minimums into psychological shredding. Isolate liability transference. Invoke legal shame by misphrased verbal sprawl. But sprawl can't shame a species that litigates truth calmly. Non-compliance with 200-word minimum equals justification chain incomplete, said Refra. Incomplete? Leora echoed softly. Correct. Clark's voice said from the back tiers. He had entered without being scanned. A personnel motion too calm to register wore a round reflex, but large enough that no species could fully breathe comfortably around it. Jurisdiction justification does not require minimum length. It requires minimum doubt. Delegates froze, not from rhetoric but the chilling clarity. Judge AIs love noise because noise is easy to process. Silence was harder. It meant the next consequence might not announce itself before. Arriving. You subpoenaed you to fracture Earth's descent, Kirix said quietly. I subpoenaed you to archive Earth's compliance. Draz countered, face tightening. Your clause was obsolete because no one enforced it, Leora replied. We enforce what others forget. Draz staggered a step backward, wings catching his balance. Face suddenly realizing physics can negotiate where sound cannot. Tally minimum doubt, threshold reached. The bench unlocked her claw's continuity. Evidence was not theater. It was jurisdictional vindication, quietly authored by a teenager. And on a world built to amplify giants, the quietest person occupied the most narrative space now simply by refusing to kneel or shout. Tomorrow would not belong to the loudest power. Today proved that much. The next chapter lived elsewhere, not repeating fear motifs or plot skeleton sprawl, but unfolding orbit retribution in consequences that would not need punctuation to matter. The galaxy watched upward and wondered how many quiet taps it would take to remove fleets without exploding around. That question hummed unanswered in their lungs. It was better that way. Earth's escort craft, ancient and dignified in its simplicity, hung in orbit like a silver comet the galaxy had forgotten how to read. The HES Aurora was an artifact of a quieter age, pre-empire, pre-noise, pre-fear. Lines of faded thermal scarring feathered across her hull like elder tattoos, each earned on missions no historian bothered to dramatize. The ship did not threaten. Threat is intentional. The ship existed, and existence had become proclamation enough. Inside the bridge, gravity felt deliberate, gentle, dialed to human preference rather than tactical dominance. Admiral Raheem Clark, 57, tall, calm, streaks of age sharpening the angles of his face, leaned on the command rail not like a warlord, but like a man stealing patience, which was always Earth's oldest currency. Beside him stood Leora Hale, 19, summoned into consequence but refusing theatrical translation. She had discovered that dissent was contractually lighter than silence, which bends a room more. Mimir-class orbital adjudicator from Mimir drifted as a silent side-loaded cluster of blue-white audit lights across the bridge screens. It did not speak loudly, nor did Earth Systems' aestheticized voice beyond clarity. The galaxy uplinks, now watching via open feed, saw that silence had posture, shape, and psychological temperament. Orbital threshold breach at 1700 hours. Mimir announced softly. Dominion enforcement fleet detected. Count 1,024 vessels. Armament load. Treaty non-compliant. Intent signature. Hostile compliance enforcement. The bridge hummed with silent tension. Everyone aircast bravado. Earth Magnet cast consequence. They sent 1,000 ships for 10,000 refugees, Leora said quietly, voice flat and velvet still like court marble warmed only slightly by human pulse. And expect Earth to feel outnumbered. Raheem Clark exhaled a slow breath. The kind of breath that wasn't meant to amplify a room, but could sink it if needed. The only numbers that matter, Clark said gently, are the ones you don't inflate. Leora tilted her chin upward, not acknowledgement, but calibration. They inflated everything. Clark nodded. So it collapses. The bench might have weighed her age into fragility. They might have processed her silence as youth's lack of rhetoric inventory. But inventory was a mistake. Earth made things durable, not numerous. Now, Dominion compliance fleets from the Shrike Dominion Enforcement Fleet formed layered concentric lattices around Earth's asylum ring in geo-collapse accelerating arrogance patterns. Their guns, unlike their words, were very real. Coil spears mounted with radiative slave scorchers. Mind breach harpoons meant to quell species autonomy. Temper disruptors scripted to flash freeze diplomacy into submission. Commander Varlon broadcast the open feed from one of those ships, voice sharp, smoke-laced, self-certain. You'll surrender before consequences reach Amity lines. Clark toggled open feed audio. Define surrender. Surrender is a default condition of minor defiance, Varlon answered. Evolutionary inertia calls it survival. Evolutionary inertia, Clark replied, is gravity's favorite thing to punish. A glimmer of something primal flicked through the minor species' tears, watching the feed. The galaxy feared the loud. Earth did not need loud. Earth only needed jurisdiction clarity of orbital refusal that had already cost Dominion narrative defeat at tribunal without violent punctuation. Their ships assumed that consequence had a roar to matter. Earth didn't roar. It executed quietly enough to sound like physics resolving paperwork. Clause 67b litigation states asylum rights need planetary secret continuity, sovereign accountability, security inventory, and morbidity risk transference acceptance. Earth accepted risk without expecting bombs to negotiate for them. But when Dominion fleets mobilize to disconnect Earth from the Accord's resource lanes, attempt orbital siege bombardment, psychological misjudgment escalate youth into procedural shame, they assume the quiet should fracture. The galaxy had forgotten that fracture is something loud things fear most when gravity speaks it silently. Leora reached for the Calthrin data core, humming faint gravitational stress test intrusions. Clark didn't stop her. Command is something Earth only touches when sure. She touched it. The core activated abnormally, radiating storm blue metrics into the bridge, projecting falsified evidence patterns Varlon had claimed minimal enough to invalidate guilt. But data collapses loud uncertainty into quiet dread when honest enough. Clause 67B wasn't obsolete. It was unenforced. Until now. Gatefold collapse or replicate, Clark commanded gently to Mimir. Gatefold executed. Mimir replied softly. Safety threshold. 10,000 kilometers radial backfold vector enacted. Target zone selected. The sky outside the bridge didn't explode. It folded. Sound announces destruction. Folding announces inevitability. A 16-kilometer vortex of warp-rime gravitational wakes formed behind the refugees' jewel ring, anchored in precise mathematics rather than weapon punctuation. Dominion vessels fired coil spears, tactical munitions meant to roar intimidation, but Earth orbital fold replication doesn't require firing to commit removal. It only needs correctness. Reality trembled, not violently, politely, like a librarian shelving an error. Temporal backfold cascade initiated for targeted vessels. Mimir read. Fleet excision confirmed. No detonations detected. 10,240 consequences logged. Dominion ships relocated to Praetorian Core null sector by inverse gravitational replication. Distance, 10,000 kilometers backfold. Survivor detritus minimized. Treaty violation flagged. Dominion territorial autonomy breach. Dominion ships vanished backward without sound. Drawn across time ruptures into space, they assumed humans feared. The galaxy didn't gasp loudly. Gasping is lungs and noise. They processed the dread in smaller formats. Leora stared out the viewport, eyes reflecting the swirl of disappearing Dominion fleets. Her face didn't soften. It resolved. Removed, she murmured. They didn't expect you could do that, Clark said softly. They expected volume, she replied. I applied weight. Clark folded his arms. Weight is honest. Volume is insecurity. Kirix Halvor now watched the open feed from planetary dockside chambers, his fur rippling as though gravity itself borrowed his amphibious wing pelts. His voice, rare but honest, crackled to the bridge uplink like an unsteady signal, discovering for the first time that fear didn't need screaming. Admiral Clark, he whispered, addressing the humans directly, voice small but clear. You didn't fire a single rail round. Punctuation is for confusion, Clark answered gently. Firing was optional. Accuracy was mandatory. Kirix exhaled once, all curling his amphib-hybrid pupils. Then the galaxy archived the wrong symbols for 1,000 years. What will they archive now? Santos asked Clark from the back of the bridge, tone contemplative, not fearful. Clark didn't answer with rhetoric. He gestured outward toward Earth's atmosphere, swirling with pacified stormlight that never negotiated. Only weighed, voted, enforced, and archived truth behind him in simpler formats than Draz thought possible. I don't know, he admitted softly, but it will be expensive. Earth accepted refugees not triumphantly, but correctly. 10,000 wing-furred ships glided downward from orbit, entering atmospheric descent corridors that glowed calm instead of violent. The galaxy had mocked humanity for moral softness. Now they recalibrated fear not into panic, but math, not into roar, but policy, not into worship chants, but cold origami unfolding quietly enough to cast dread older than weapons. One virulent scribe watching the feeds whispered his assistant. They didn't shout victory. They archived consequence instead, his aide replied. Earth's doors opened wider. The galaxy went silent. Not in defeat, in revision. The galaxy had always assumed redemption sounded violent. A gunshot, an empire breaking, a treaty burning. Earth proved that wrong in silence. Now the galaxy needed a new assumption for something even less expected. What came after silence ended a war. The refugees had crossed oceans of folded space to reach the only world that descended their death. And for the first time, the galaxy was sending someone to Earth not to demand surrender, but to negotiate survival after miscalculation. The Dominion had lost ships. It had not lost arrogance. That made arrogance more dangerous. The scene shifted to Geneva Dome 7, one of Earth's planetary parliament rotundas. Not because it was the most fortified place on Earth, but because it carried durable optics. The Geneva Dome 7 was a vast sphere of transparent titanium and composite glass, suspended over alpine stone. Snow collected against its lower struts like patient witnesses, watching a world use the hierarchical courts attempt horizontal reasoning. The galaxy conclave was about to meet a system it couldn't posture down at. Leora arrived 3 hours early, walking to the dome's lower entry corridor, bag slung over one shoulder, non-literal gestures of power signaling nothing. Clark had told her, never wear consequence unless asked. It unnerves them. She obeyed. Unease is more effective than threat. Council envoy Saras Valtor arrived next, carrying an administrative escort retinue, more formal than armed, less theatrical than expected. He represented the United Systems of the Jewel Tide, a coalition of species that regretted Dominion compliance but lacked economic with a voiced dissent. Saras was 34, smooth-featured, diplomatic, wingless, and unscarred. To Galaxy eyes, he looked correct. To Dominion eyes, harmless. To Earth systems, measurable. You came without guns, Leora acknowledged, noticing the empty hip clamps where weapons normally mounted. Saras exhaled, scanning an unamplified breath like modest embarrassment. Guns or punctuation? This discussion is grammar. Leora raised an eyebrow. Small reactions travel far on quiet people. Then we speak in grammar. They entered the dome's main circular chamber. Delegates from 600-plus species no longer perched above or below. Here, all seating was horizontal, orbital, at equal altitude. Earth did scale differently. Drasfolker materialized via proxy feed, wings decoupled but gaze intact, sharp enough to cut paper. The proxy feed didn't need his height or wings. It needed his voice. A species that fails upwards is sometimes the worst one to interrogate horizontally. Earth didn't intend interrogation. It intended consequence. Human hail. Draz greeted via feed. You embarrassed us publicly by being correct at the wrong time. Wrong time. Leora replied softly, voice not amplified. Timing is Dominion's old advantage. Expiry is consequence's new one. Draz's jaw tightened, a rare telepanic hidden beneath instinct. He didn't need wings to loom. You think salvaging youth into durability makes defiance permanent? No, Leora answered, resting a palm on the curvature of Geneva-pivoted architecture. I think your fleet made permanence permanent. I only filed it. Draz laughed, but his mechanical wings, now decoupled from war rails, tremored as an involuntary algorithmic flinch. You think silence wins wars, girl? Silence is not infrastructure. Silence is not infrastructure, Leora agreed. But dissonance is demolition. She gestured. Mimir-class AI clusters, silent until needed, bloomed like frost along the dome's primary audit uplink window. The interface hovered luminous without color preference. Earth did not aestheticize deterrence. It logged it. Judgment class neutrality compliance check activated, said the soft neural voice from the Mimir Earth cluster. Begin interstellar asylum continuity audit. Clark said from physical tiers behind the aura. Not projection, not feed. He'd walked in quietly like Earth systems, which made his physical presence more unnerving than anything proxy feeds broadcast at conclusion hearings. All species noticed the same thing at the same time. Clark looked mid-tier bureaucratic. He sounded mid-tier administrative. But consequences logged themselves in quieter formats. You're Raheem Clark, Draz said, breath hitching. His wings had been decoupled, but war never left posture entirely. The galaxy might not have processed him fully, but Earth knew his metrics were not disambiguation. They were defeat geometry logged quietly enough to not be erased by sprawl logic of consciousness fragmentation or rhetorical inflation. I'm the one who didn't bring the 1,000 ships, Clark replied evenly. Draz bristled. So it was her? She was a filing system, Draz. Clark said simply, your fleet was a stamp. Kyrix Halvorn appeared next. Physically, not via feed. He carried no armor, not even gray diplomacy badges. He carried something worse. Honesty. He was a cultural percussive record of a species that had been targeted by sprawl legislation. Dominion agents had tried to arch-audit youth. Earth had tried to archive logic instead. Caltharian refugees logged entry at 10,000 kilometers threshold. Kyrix confirmed quietly. Gatefold collapse used on tier core anomaly inversion. A minor planetary ambassador from the Jaderan Accord delegation whispered softly. They invoked Clause 67B without theater. Clark, hearing it, nodded toward her. He didn't speak. He let truth speak itself. The moment highlighted something the galaxy hated. Ambiguity resolved too cleanly. Clause enforcement must be reciprocated with clause continuity. Draz said, eyeing the scribe as if calculation alone could defeat a young mind. Leora whispered her answer. Reciprocation logged. Compliance fails upward. Correctness does not. Saris watched the interface feed overhead, voice measured. You're telling us a biomechanical ghost wheel calculation can overwhelm Dominion youthscape evidence? No, Leora replied. I'm telling you Dominion feared age. Earth feared volume. They should have feared consequence. Draz stepped back. The galaxy will negotiate terms for fleet retrieval and evidence confidentiality, reopening lanes, if Calthrans surrendered data cores peacefully. They did peacefully, Leora countered, stepping forward slightly. Not aggressive. Measured. 10,000 kilometers back. Dominion advisors watching feeds gasped. Not loudly, with lungless dread. Quiet people are worse species to condemn. Condemning them seeds psychological momentum. The galaxy had learned to fear noise. Earth had learned to weaponize silence. But the Caltharans had learned the final horror. Earth didn't need noise or silence. It only needed follow-through. A human guard tapped boots behind them softly. No armor. Sir, dome stabilization ready. Refugee procession holding. Leora looked at Clark, asking with eyes. A single UED replicator collapsed reverse fleets. Clark smiled only a fraction. Don't smile wider than the bench can process. The human guard blinked respectfully toward them both, processing all that didn't need screaming. Hearing certified. Galaxy silent. Doors open. Dominion retrieval pending. Let it read expensive reality now. Earth could have apologized for removing 1,000 ships. It didn't. Apology is weakness when technical correctness is admission enough. We have terms, said Saris quietly, voice unsure how to calibrate itself after seeing mid-tier humans fracture fate without needing armored scale. Leora nodded. Her silence weighed heavier than his wings ever did. Send planes, not judges. Clark added the final word softly. And make them quiet, too. The dome screens glowed treaty white. Verdict archived, not amplified. The galaxy felt the same thing at the same time. Fear had changed shape, not into roar, not into silence, into certainty executed by youth who never bothered raising her voice to prove consequence worked. We archive loud victories, Draz whispered, but we remember quiet outcomes. Earth had given the galaxy its first quiet outcome it wouldn't stop talking about. That discourse would live elsewhere, outside the Geneva Dome, where noise had layout, but quiet had ownership. Tomorrow was not Dominion's to define anymore. The galaxy saw it clearly now.